Have you ever held on to something with all your strength, only to watch it slip away anyway, and years later suddenly realize that losing it might have been the best thing that ever happened to you? Have you ever lain awake at night scrolling through old messages, wondering whether your life would be completely different if, back then, you had not been so obsessed with getting a certain result? Welcome back to the channel. It is good to have you here again. Today, I want to sit with you and talk slowly about a phrase we have all heard countless times: just go with the flow. Everything has its own arrangement. At first glance, it sounds like a comforting slogan on a poster hanging in a waiting room. But behind those simple words, there is a very deep question. Are we practicing a wise, awake kind of letting go? Or are we simply using acceptance as an elegant way to run away from our responsibility and effort? In other words, what does it really mean to let things take their natural course without collapsing into blind resignation? When people say, maybe heaven has its arrangement, or maybe the universe knows better than we do, are they pointing to a real insight about life? Or are they just trying to make themselves feel better after a failure? The original story begins from a very human place. Life does not go perfectly for anyone. Gains and losses are the normal rhythm of existence. We get something, then one day we lose it. We meet, we separate, we rise, we fall. There is nothing abnormal about that. Yet every time life does not follow our script, our first reaction is still often shock and pain. We feel as if some cosmic rule has been broken, as if we were entitled to a smooth road just because we tried hard and imagined the right result. The text says that to really live with this truth, to really accept that gains and losses are part of the path, requires more than just a casual shrug and a few comforting sentences. It takes awakening, wisdom, trust in cause and effect, and a heart that is slowly trained through practice to loosen its grip. That kind of trust is not laziness, it is strength. That kind of letting go is not numbness, it is clarity. So in this video, imagine we are walking down a long quiet street together. Maybe you are listening with earphones on the train. Maybe you are washing dishes. Maybe you are just lying on your bed staring at the ceiling. I will tell you some stories, and as you listen, just let your mind gently compare them with your own life. Think about the people and events that still stick in your throat, the regrets you replay again and again, the opportunities you thought you ruined forever. Ask yourself quietly, is it possible that some of what you call loss was actually a different kind of arrangement? One that you only understand when you look back from a distance. There is a young man in the original story. Let us call him Daniel. From childhood, he was very driven. At school, he wanted to come first. At work, he wanted to climb quickly. In love, he wanted to feel that everything was under control and secure. Around the time he graduated, he had a detailed blueprint for his life. By 28, he would be steadily promoted. Around 30, he would buy a home and get married. By 35, he would already be in a managerial position and earning enough so that his parents could relax and his future children would never have to struggle. He was not just dreaming, he was truly working hard. He stayed up late, took extra courses, volunteered to take on projects nobody else wanted, because he believed that effort guarantees reward. His logic was simple. If he gave life his best, life would certainly give him back what he wanted. But life is not a vending machine. You do not insert a fixed amount of effort and automatically receive the product you selected. Sometimes you work through the night and the opportunity still does not belong to you. Sometimes you love with all your heart and the person still leaves. Sometimes you obey all the rules and something still breaks. That is what happened to him. At 28, Instead of being promoted as he expected, he was suddenly laid off in a round of company restructuring. He had paid for a new apartment but had not finished furnishing it. He just started talking about marriage with his girlfriend. Overnight, the careful plan in his mind collapsed like an castle hit by an unexpected wave. He told himself he would find a new job quickly. He sent out dozens, then hundreds of resumes. He went to interview after interview. Each time, he tried to smile, tried to show that he was still the confident, capable young man from before. But the answers that came back were frequently polite rejections. He began to wonder if he had somehow been abandoned by luck, or even by fate. His girlfriend tried to encourage him at first. She said, "You are talented. You will find something even better." But as months dragged on and nothing seemed to move, she started to hesitate. Her parents began to question whether he was really a stable partner. He felt more and more pressured, ashamed, and defensive. Their conversations, once relaxed and playful, turned into silent dinners and hidden accusations. One evening, after yet another argument about money and the future, she said the words he had feared for a long time. "Maybe this is not working. Maybe we should separate before we hurt each other more." In that moment, he felt as if everything had been taken from him in 1 year. His career, his relationship, his imagined future. Looking at his reflection in the dark window that night, he asked the kind of questions many of us have asked in private. What did I do wrong? Why did life treat me like this when I tried so hard? Is all this talk about natural flow just nonsense people use when they have no other explanation? For a while, his heart hardened. When people told him to trust the process, he felt insulted. To him, that sounded like an excuse for failure. To him, the phrase "let it be" meant you are weak, so you may as well stop trying. Then one day, he met an older mentor, a former colleague who had retired early. They went out for a simple meal. The mentor listened quietly to his story and then asked him a question he had never considered. The mentor said, "If everything had gone according to your plan, where would you be now?" Daniel thought about it. "I would still be in the old company, in a slightly better position. I would have married my ex. We would be paying off the mortgage, maybe already having a baby. I would be exhausted but proud." The mentor nodded. "Does that still sound perfect to you?" At first, yes, but as he imagined that life more vividly, another feeling arose. He remembered the stress of that company culture, the constant pressure, the politics. He remembered how often he had questioned whether that field actually suited him, whether he really wanted to stay in that environment for decades. He remembered arguments with his ex, in which she said she did not understand his deeper interests, and how they avoided certain conversations because they both sensed gaps they did not know how to bridge. The mentor gently continued, "When a door you love slams shut, it feels like cruelty, but sometimes what you love is not what truly fits you. Sometimes what you cling to is just the first version of your dream, not the real dream itself. When life takes something away, it does not necessarily mean you are worthless. It may mean that that path is not aligned with where your soul needs to go. You may not see it now, but can you leave a little space for the possibility that this seeming disaster has meaning beyond your present view?" Something softened. It did not happen overnight. He did not suddenly become positive and enlightened. For quite a long time, he continued to feel confused and lost. But that question planted a seed. Bit by bit, he allowed himself to explore fields he had previously dismissed. He took freelance projects. He learned new skills that were closer to his original interests. He dusted off an old hobby that once brought him joy but that he had buried in order to chase a respectable career. 3 years later, his life looked completely different from the plan his 28-year-old self had drawn. He was not in a traditional corporate ladder anymore. He was working in a smaller but meaningful organization, doing work that aligned with his values. His income was not as high as his original projection, but his heart felt lighter when he woke up. He eventually met someone whose outlook matched his much more closely than his ex. Looking back, he said something interesting. "When I lost my job and my relationship in the same year, I thought life was pushing me into a dark corner. Now I see that life was pushing me out of a dead end. At the time, I only saw loss. Now I see redirect." Where in your life have you experienced something similar? At the time, it felt like a brutal rejection. Years later, you realize that if you had stayed on that path, some part of you would have withered. This is where the real meaning of letting things follow their course begins to show. It is not about never planning, never striving, never setting goals. It is about a different attitude at the deepest level of the mind. It asks you to give your best effort in each moment, while also knowing that you do not control all the conditions. It asks you to act fully, but cling lightly. There is a phrase often used in spiritual practice circles: do what you can, accept what you cannot control. It sounds simple, but living it is a lifelong training. Think about it. You can control your intention. You can control the sincerity of your effort. You can control whether you show up on time, whether you prepare, whether you try to be honest and kind. But you cannot control other people's choices. You cannot control the economy. You cannot control accidents or illnesses. You cannot control whether someone loves you back. When you confuse these two categories, suffering multiplies. When you try to control what you cannot control, you exhaust yourself chasing shadows. When you neglect what you can control, you use fate as a shield to hide your laziness or fear. The wise kind of acceptance is like this. With things that are truly in your hands, you have the courage to move, to change, to apologize, to grow. With things that are not in your hands, you practice relaxing the knot in your chest and trusting that a larger pattern is at work. Even if you cannot yet see it, imagine a parent watching a child grow. A mother wants to give her son the best. She chooses schools carefully, signs him up for classes, tries to guide his choices. She spends sleepless nights worrying about his exam results. She looks at other people's children and feels panicked when her own seems to fall behind. Her son, however, is not a project. He is a living person with his own character, his own timing, his own karma. She can advise, accompany, and model values, but she cannot walk every step for him. At some point, a wise parent must accept that each child has a life path separate from their expectations. They can water the soil of the child's heart with love, but they cannot decide what kind of tree will grow. There is a very fine line between responsibility and control. Taking responsibility means doing your part with care. Control means trying to dictate outcomes and refusing to accept any result other than the one in your head. When we cross that line, relationships crack. Children feel suffocated. Partners feel disrespected. We ourselves feel constantly anxious because life rarely obeys our commands. The practice of letting life flow asks us to move back from control into responsibility, to say, "I will do my best, and then I will respect the mystery of the rest." Another common misunderstanding is that go with the flow means stop caring. A student fails an exam and shrugs. It is fate. Someone hurts another person and says, "It must be karma. I cannot help it." A worker slacks often says, "If a promotion is meant to be, it will come anyway." That is not spiritual wisdom. That is spiritual laziness. Real acceptance does not cancel cause and effect. It respects it. It understands that every thought, word, and action plants a seed in the field of life. Those seeds will ripen sooner or later. When you see that clearly, you are more careful with your choices, not less. Let us take relationships as an example. Perhaps you know someone who always says, after a breakup, "If we were meant to be, we would be together. Since it ended, it was never fate." That sentence may bring temporary comfort, but it may also hide something. It may be hiding an unwillingness to examine how they themselves behaved in the relationship. Maybe they were avoidant. Maybe they ignored the other person's needs. Maybe they trusted too quickly or doubted too much. Maybe they let fear or pride lead their decisions. If they do not look at these patterns, if they only say it was not meant to be, then they will carry the same blind spots into their next relationship. They will repeat the same story and call it different destiny. Spiritual growth asks us to look honestly at our own part in every drama, without sinking into self-hatred. We acknowledge our mistakes. We feel the sting of regret. And then we use that pain as motivation to become more awake, more compassionate, more responsible. That is the effort part. The letting go part comes after we have done this work. After we have apologized when necessary, learned what we can, and tried our best, we stop hitting ourselves with the same questions over and over. What if I had done this instead? What if I had said that? At a certain point, endless analysis only deepens the wound. There is a moment where you simply bow to what is. You say, "I have done what I could. The rest is beyond me." And then, as best you can, you start walking forward again. In my own life, I have met people who carried some form of loss for decades. A woman who never forgave herself for choosing a lower-paying job that she later regretted. A man who could not let go of a failed business and saw every later attempt through the lens of that old shame. A person who clung to a first love in their heart long after that person had moved on, measuring all later partners against an idealized memory. When they finally started to open their hands, they often said something surprising. It was not "now I do not care." It was "now I see more clearly." They came to realize that back then, they had not actually lost everything. They had lost a certain version of life, but they had also been freed from a pattern that no longer served them. There is a quiet kind of grace hidden inside many of our disappointments. When an unhealthy job ends, it may push us into developing parts of ourselves we would otherwise never have discovered. When a relationship that is wrong at a deep level falls apart, it may prevent a future full of resentment and bitterness. When a plan collapses, it may create space for a more authentic path to emerge. Of course, this is not about forcing yourself to be grateful right in the middle of fresh pain, when you have just gone through a breakup, or lost a job, or faced a serious illness. The last thing you need is someone telling you cheerfully, "This is actually a gift. Be thankful." That attitude is not compassion. It is denial. Grief needs time. Strong emotions need to be felt. Letting life flow does not mean suppressing sadness, anger, or fear. It means allowing them to move through you without letting them turn into bitterness and hopelessness. There is a practical way to work with this. The next time something does not go your way, first allow yourself to react. Cry if you need to. Talk to someone. Write in a journal. Admit, even if only to yourself, "This hurts. This is not what I wanted." That honesty is important. Then, when the intensity softens just a little, gently add another question. Ask, is there anything I can still do with integrity in this situation? If the answer is yes, do that. Maybe it is an apology. Maybe it is looking for alternatives. Maybe it is seeking help. After that, add a different question. Ask, beyond what I can do, what might this be trying to teach me? You may not hear an answer immediately. That is fine. The important thing is that your mind begins to open a small window, a gap in which possibility can enter. You are no longer locked in the story of I am a victim and this is pure meaningless cruelty. You are allowing the possibility that there is a deeper pattern unfolding. Over time, this habit changes the quality of your entire life. Think of your mind as a river. When you try to control everything, you stand in the river with your arms spread wide, trying to block the water. You become exhausted, frustrated, and the current eventually knocks you down anyway. When you withdraw in resignation, you sit down on the bank and let the river sweep away everything important while you stare at the ground, telling yourself that nothing matters. Letting life flow wisely is neither of these. It is learning how to swim. You still move. You choose a direction. You use your arms and legs, but you also respect the current. You learn when to go with it, when to cross it, and when to pause in a quiet pool. You accept that you will never control the entire river. And you also accept that you are not a helpless stone. There is another story in the original text about love. Imagine someone who cannot stop looking back at an old relationship. Let us call her Emma. Years ago, she was deeply in love with a man she believed she would marry. They made plans, traveled together, dreamed together. She thought he was the one. Then, at some point, cracks appeared. Their values in some areas did not match. Their styles of communication clashed. He wanted a life in a different city. She could not imagine leaving her aging parents. They argued, reconciled, argued again. Eventually, they separated. On the outside, time passed. She went to work, met new people, even tried dating again. But inside, a part of her remained frozen in that old story. On quiet nights, she would read their past messages, scroll through photos, and ask herself the same painful questions. What if I had compromised a little more? What if he had been more patient? What if we had tried one more time? Years later, she heard he had married someone else. The news hit her like a stone. She spent days in a fog, feeling as if those years had been wasted. If only we had stayed together, that could have been my life, she thought. One day, a friend who cared about her asked a very simple question. Tell me honestly, if you had actually married him back then, and nothing fundamental had changed in either of you, what do you think your daily life would look like now? She closed her eyes and pictured it. The things she had once ignored now stood out more clearly. She saw how he dismissed her feelings during conflicts, how he avoided talking about long-term responsibilities, how he joked about topics that were sacred to her. She imagined living in a city far from her family, constantly negotiating between her own needs and his career. Slowly, she admitted, it might not have been the peaceful, loving marriage I imagined. I might have felt very alone. The friend gently said, then maybe, just maybe, that breakup was not an act of random cruelty. Maybe it was life saying, this path is not your path. Maybe what you lost was not truly yours to keep. Maybe what you gained was space for a better alignment later. That conversation did not immediately erase her sadness, but it shifted its color. It was no longer sadness mixed with regret and self-blame. It became sadness mixed with understanding and a trace of gratitude. She realized that letting it be did not mean erasing the past or pretending it never mattered. It meant respecting the fact that every connection has its timing, its purpose, and its natural end. Some people walk with us for a long journey. Some only walk with us for a single chapter. Both can be meaningful. From that point, she stopped treating that relationship as the golden standard that no one else could meet. Instead, she began to appreciate the lessons it had brought. It had taught her what she truly valued in a partner. It had revealed her own tendencies to sacrifice too much and speak too little. Because of that experience, she approached later relationships with more clarity and courage. If you look at your own past, you may find something similar. A job you did not get pushed you to develop a skill you now rely on. An opportunity you missed protected you from a trap you did not see. A person who left your life created room for you to find your own voice. Of course, not every loss will reveal its meaning clearly. Some pains remain mysterious. That is where trust enters. Not naive, blind trust that denies reality, but a quiet, steady trust that says, even though I do not yet understand, I will not let this pain turn my heart into stone. I will keep walking, keep learning, keep loving as best I can. In spiritual language, this is often described as trusting the workings of cause and effect. Our actions, thoughts, and intentions create patterns. Those patterns ripple through our lives. But there are many layers of causes, including ones from the past that we cannot see. Sometimes a present event is the result of seeds planted long ago, in childhood, or even earlier than that. We do not have to hold fixed theories about exactly how that works. It is enough to adopt a humble attitude, instead of always asking, "Why me?" in a complaining tone. We can ask, "What is this inviting me to see more clearly? What kind of person is this experience asking me to become?" Over time, this shift from "why me" to "what now" changes despair into a path. Now imagine the small, concrete moments of daily life where this practice can take root. You are in traffic and someone cuts you off. Your first impulse is anger. You feel your breath speed up, your hands tighten. In that second, you have a choice. You can follow the anger, shout, lean on your horn, and carry that mood into your entire day. Or you can notice the irritation, take a breath, and let it pass. You can tell yourself, "I cannot control how they drive, but I can control how I respond." That tiny act of letting go is also a piece of going with the flow. You apply for a position you genuinely want. You prepare, study, arrange your schedule, give the interview everything you have. The result still comes back no. Instead of instantly collapsing into stories like "I am not good enough, nothing ever works for me," you give yourself a day to feel disappointed, and then you ask, "What did I learn from preparing for this? Is there feedback I can use? What direction is this rejection pointing me toward?" The outer situation has not changed, but your inner posture has. You argue with someone you care about. You say things you regret. Later, your ego wants to defend itself. Well, they started it, but a clearer part of you sees your own harsh words. The easy path is to say, "This is just our fate. We are incompatible," and stop talking. The more mature path is to apologize for your part, regardless of whether they do the same. After you have done that, if the relationship still cannot be healed, you can then let it go without the torment of unfinished inner work. In all these examples, you are neither forcing outcomes nor passively accepting everything. You are doing what you can and then letting the rest unfold. That is the living meaning of the phrase we are exploring. Near the end of the original story, there are some very down-to-earth suggestions for cultivating this attitude. They revolve around two main practices: giving your all where you have power, and calming your mind before reacting. Giving your all does not mean obsession. It does not mean losing your health, your relationships, or your integrity chasing a single goal. It means that in each situation, you identify the actions that are truly yours to take, and you do them with sincerity. Calming your mind before reacting is like installing a small pause button in your life when something unexpected happens, instead of instantly firing back with your habitual reaction. You create a breath of space. Maybe you literally take 3 slow breaths. Maybe you step away from the phone before replying to a message that triggered you. Maybe you sleep on a decision instead of sending an angry letter at midnight. That pause does not magically fix everything, but it greatly reduces the harm you cause yourself and others. It gives your inner wisdom a chance to speak before your old habits grab the wheel. Over time, as we practice these small things, something larger shifts. We discover that we do not need to fight with life all the time. We also discover that we do not need to give up and drift aimlessly. We realize that there is a middle way: walk with intention, but walk with openness. And this brings us back to you, listening right now. Maybe you are in a season where you feel that life has taken a lot from you. A relationship changed. A dream did not come true. A plan fell apart. Maybe you are in the middle of that raw, painful stage where you cannot yet see any meaning in the mess. I am not here to tell you that you should already be grateful. I am not here to demand that you instantly see the blessing in your hardship. That is not how real healing works. What I am here to offer is companionship and a different way of looking. First, you are allowed to feel exactly what you feel. You do not have to pretend to be strong all the time. You do not have to force a smile. Cry if you need to. Admit your anger and fear. Honesty is part of wisdom. Second, after the first storms of emotion have passed, gently ask yourself whether there is any small place in your life right now where you can act, rather than only react. It might be as simple as cleaning your room, updating your resume, going for a walk, or sending a message to someone you trust. Action does not need to be dramatic. It just needs to be alive. Third, hold this question somewhere in your heart. Like a seed, could it be that what I call lost today will look different from the mountaintop years from now? Do not force an answer. Just hold the question. Finally, watch yourself over time. You may notice that as you practice this way of living, your inner balance becomes less fragile. You are still touched by joy and pain, but you are not destroyed so easily. You still care deeply, but you do not cling so desperately. You still dream, but you do not collapse when reality does not match your imagination. In that sense, letting things follow their course is not about believing some external force is arranging everything for you while you sit and wait. It is about cooperating with life. You walk your part of the path, and you trust that the rest will meet you halfway in its own timing. Before we end, I want to share something that might resonate. Think back to a time in your life when you really believed, if I lose this, it will be the end of me. Maybe it was a person, a job, a city, a dream. Did you, in fact, disappear when you lost it? Or did you, slowly and painfully perhaps, grow into someone new? You are still here. You are listening to these words. That means you have already survived some things you once thought you could not survive. That alone is evidence that you are stronger and more adaptable than your fear tells you. Your story is not over because one chapter ended differently than you expected. The book is still being written. The author is not just fate. It is also the part of you that chooses, learns, forgives, and moves forward. If anything in this long sharing touched your heart, I would like to hear from you in the comments. If you feel comfortable, tell us about one loss in your life that, with time, revealed itself as a turning point. It might still hurt, but maybe you can see some hidden wisdom in it now. Or share a story about a time when trying to control everything only made you more miserable, and how learning to let go changed the outcome inside you. Your story might be exactly what another person needs to hear tonight. Sometimes we feel alone in our struggles because no one around us talks honestly about theirs. By sharing, we build a quiet community of people who are learning to walk this path of effort and surrender together. If you found this video comforting, thought-provoking, or helpful in any way, please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss future uploads. If you want to support this space more deeply, you can also consider joining as a member. That support helps keep this channel going so that we can continue exploring questions about destiny, wisdom, cause and effect, compassion, practice, and the subtle ways life guides us even through our losses. Thank you for spending this time here. Whatever you are going through, may you find the strength to do what you can, the courage to face what you feel, and the gentle trust to let the rest unfold. There comes a time when you realize you want something that belongs just to you, something that brings comfort and keeps you connected to your inner world. Wall-crafted bracelet does exactly that. Quietly, softly, and consistently. If you felt drawn to any bracelet in this video, you'll find the purchase link in the video description, and many more auctions in the channel's storefront. Because sometimes the smallest item can bring the biggest sense of peace.